Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It podcast. I'm your podcast host, Robert Davis. I really appreciate you all for tuning in to another episode. Before we get started, just want to take a quick second to, just do the normal plugging of myself and the show. Follow me on Instagram, um, username RTD underscore III. Follow me on Facebook, Robert Trey Davis III. The podcast is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and iHeartRadio. If you listen to it on another medium, just let me know, and I'll try to put it up there for you. And so, with that being said, we'll kind of jump into today's show. Um, Today, just kind of want to talk about something. If for you all that don't know me, I'm a huge sports fan, and just kind of want to talk about in today's episode kind of the college sports and the state of where that is, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And with that, just kind of wanted to introduce my guest for today's show, Ricky Stone. Rick, how you doing, bro?
I'm all right, man. I appreciate you having me on.
No problem, man. Give you a second before we start. Plug yourself. If people don't know, Rick is a huge sports fanatic, sports damn near sports analyst, really. And so, he's knowledgeable on the subject. So if there's anybody to talk to about this and have this conversation, we had this conversation a lot just in our own time. I thought it would be good to bring it to the show. So
Yeah. Just follow me on Instagram, Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, Ruco Podcast, real underrated, Karen overrated, doing live streams, talk about music, sports, pretty much anything of the culture. So I'm just glad to be on here with you, man. We're able to chop it up like we usually do.
yeah, bro. No doubt, no doubt. And so, like, to kind of intro into the show, like we talk about college sports, right? And like, I guess one thing I want to talk about in terms of it, the concept of it has always kind of traditionally been around the student athlete, like at least in terms of like how the colleges and NCAA projected. And I think in terms of that, and we'll get into this kind of later, but like the biggest kind of change I've seen is how that concept is treated now, in a sense. And I just feel like it's kind of like I feel like it's kind of like less serious, but at the same time, I know it's kind of a caveat that when we talk about this, we're talking about kind of only applying to like your three biggest programs, like your three biggest athletic programs in a sense, like the kids that play golf and lacrosse and your cheerleaders for the most part, they're not having to deal with some of the issues kind of that we'll be talking about in terms of NIL and transfer portal and all that. But for those that did, I feel for those that do, and these are the ones that get the most eyeballs for the school and draw the money and everything like that. Just I feel like it is a shift at least in how that's been viewed. I want to see, how you feel about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a shift, but honestly, it's long overdue. When you look at it, the only thing that's different from, I guess, what you call amateur athletes in the school level to college level, definitely, versus professional athletes, is the fact that they are doing this for an entity that's bigger than just the sports teams. When you look at an NFL, NBA, MLB, it's the team, and then it's the league, and it's pretty much them. So what they're doing for the team and the league, they're able to profit off of. But when you're in college for so long, these student athletes, men and women, were just products of the university, not even the team, just the university, because you have alumni, you have people who love the school, people who live near the school, people that work for the school. It's a bigger base than just people who come to the games. It's people that support and donate to the schools. And a lot of that money was just going back into the schools instead of these athletes that risk their body, their mind. It's a physical, mental toll year round, keeping them away from friends, family, and a lot of the opportunities that other students are presented with, they could not get legally because a lot of that was deemed illegal. So, I mean, I think it is a change, but just navigating it has always been a tricky part. I think that's why powers that be have been so scared to adapt this, but it's going to take some time, but it's definitely going in the right direction, in my opinion.
I feel that. And like you kind of went into one of the things I want to talk about in terms of just like intro and into this is like these issues aren't new. Like,
Right.
like any of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, like none of this is new. Like back in, like, we all hear like older guys talk about like how stuff went back in like the early 90s and stuff. Like they were sliding kids money under the table, buying them stuff. Like all these things that we talk about in the news now, like, oh, these kids, they're getting like all this money and attention. Like that was happening then. It just, the infrastructure was different,
Hmm.
you know? Like, and so I think that's always a change in how it goes. But like, I think the state of it has kind of drastically changed in like the last 5 years to talk about how that shift happened. It may be longer than the last 5 years, but definitely at least in the last 5 years.
Right.
Like, and I think that's like with the introduction of like NIL, COVID, the transfer portal, um, and I think just the overall shift in like how academics and how these schools are looked at. I think by like especially like by the younger culture, I think that's kind of how things kind of shifted to how they are now. Um, but I do agree with you. I mean, I think the biggest thing is that comes from this has been that like the student athletes can now get like they can get their own share. They can get an equitable share of kind of, well, I don't want to say equitable to a degree, an equitable share of kind of like the revenues, and they can also create their own opportunities, like you were saying, where they wouldn't have had that chance before. And so I think to your point, the schools are still profiting, obviously. They wouldn't be doing this if they wouldn't, but that's the biggest thing.
Right.
And like I think in terms of like just why all this matters, like to a degree, I think colleges are, I think the concerning part of at least kind of how we see kind of kids, the transferring in and out and leaving early and all of this is that, or at least, and even in the recruiting kind of concept too, I think colleges are starting to operate more like semi-professional programs. And I think that's kind of, I don't know if it's to say good or bad to the point that you were making, but I think it definitely is something to consider in terms of just how these organizations are now moving, in terms of like some of them are trying to push kids out to transfer to go to other schools so they can bring in, different ones. Like, and so I think to that point of, I think it might be kind of a double standard, but I think it's okay when when the students do it. I don't think it's okay when the schools do it.
Hmm.
And like, I think that kind of also defeats the point of like the student athlete from their perspective. If they don't care about the student athlete, like what is it even, like what's the point of it all at that point?
Yeah, and that's something that you just have to look at, and a lot of us as fans and outsiders really just have to get adjusted to, because if we're going to look at it, allowing these student athletes to profit and prosper off of their achievements on the field and courts and etc., then the schools have to operate like these professional teams and these franchises. So, hey, if this athlete isn't performing, or this athlete doesn't want to be here, or they are not bringing pride to the university and our programs, then we have to look for options of maybe we can kind of get this kid to go somewhere else, or everybody's paying these kids now. So it'll be easier for them to leave if we're discipline them per se. And of course, that's a tough word to use when you're talking about earning money. But I mean, even at a regular job, there's things when you're getting paid, they expect you to do and they expect you to refrain from doing. So when you're in these programs and they're not satisfied, that's something that's going to be a little sticky, but you have to realize that they expect a certain level of performance and professionalism.
Yeah.
And again, with college age kids, that's a really steep slope to go on.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I do think it is. I think it's naive to think that there's not a contract to a degree involved in this. Like if you're there at a school on a football scholarship, then you're expected to perform at that level for them. And if you don't perform at that level for them, they just the point that you're a student there won't impact them from like at the least just revoking your scholarship, or you off the football team. They might not put you out to school, but you know what I mean. Like, so I definitely understand you to that degree in terms of like it can't just all be one sided in favor of the students in that regard. Um, and I think another reason to talk about why this matters is I know to a degree we mentioned earlier, like it's always been to the point of different. students have, or these high level athletes having like a lot of fame and notoriety around them. To a degree, it is. We're seeing some that are having more, and it's to a degree that I do think it's at least, what's the word I'm looking for? They're having a lot thrown at them with little infrastructure to kind of control it. And like examples like Kayla Williams, like you making 7 million in NIL, and I know his father and them have kind of a plan, so he might not be the best example of this. But you have a lot of young men doing this. Like they're making 7, 10 million more than they would off their rookie contract if they even went into the league. And I do think, for these young men, where some of them don't have, it's not that they're not making good decisions. Some of them just ain't at that level to be making those decisions with that sort of money. I think it is
Right.
I don't want to say good or bad, but it is something that matters, that you're having more of these young people in these situations where they have the chance to make these, everybody ain't going to just like, oh, I'm investing in the community. Oh, I'm going to make sure my mom and my family good. Like everybody ain't doing that. How many kids going to go out, buy a Hellcat and race it 70, 90 miles per hour down the nearest highway like half the Georgia football team does every year? You know what I mean? Like, so, like, what I mean? But for real, like, so, like, I think that's part of, the good and the bad of it. Like,
Yeah, and
and
then it takes another onus onto the organizations and the schools. I keep saying organizations because I mean that's how they have to operate.
yeah,
But
for
I
real.
mean, you can look at it. I'm pretty sure you saw some stuff like this when you were in college, and I did as well. Like some of these athletes can't even take some courses because
Right.
of the attendance policy or
You're
the work
restricted from
that's
certain
yeah,
programs. Yeah.
exactly. Like you have to do presentations or group work and you're never there. And
Hmm.
like for instance, I was in a class and the professor flat out said, you got 3 absences in my class this semester. If you know you're gonna be missing more than those, raise your hand. It was an athlete in the class. They had a brief conversation. I caught back up with him and he was like, yeah, I can't even be in this class because I know I'm going to miss more than that. So you have to flip that around. Like you said, a lot of these people don't have the experience with that money or with that type of decision making. So then you have to look, if you mandate something like study hall, or there are professors on your faculty that are going to pose difficulties for athletes because some of them are doing that just to kind of weed out something to make it easier for them. But these are people who are working for the university just like the professors are, whether they
Yeah.
like it or not, because it's a bigger scale and obviously they get more notoriety. But things like finance classes, decision making, something that they could do possibly on Zoom or, maybe once a week or something where they could get in front of these students and just let them know, not financial guidance, but financial advice, what to do, what to save up for, taxes, avoiding scams and things like that. So they have a better navigational tool when they're starting to see more money than probably anybody's seen in their family to that point, or anybody seen in a while, or anybody around them, especially at that age, is seen.
Yeah, no, definitely. This ain't like, oh, we just funneling you, $10,000 under the table or something like that anymore. You got a kid that can make 2 million flat from an independent, third party contract, not even with the school. Yeah,
Right.
but I feel like to your point, it's still some ownership on the university to provide, like, so, especially when your job is to be shaping young people's minds. You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
you have financial literacy classes within the university because you have a business program. Every single school does. So I'm sure, you know what I'm saying? I'm sure those avenues, it's not even something that they have to create. I'm sure that they already exist. Like,
Right.
so it's just putting that in front of them. I agree with you. And like, I think another reason like this matters is to this movement. I guess these current shifts that we've seen, and I don't know how it relates into like with Trump and I guess regarding of how he regards like them as being employed or employees or just students of the university. But like aside from that, this has been reflective of like a power shift, I guess, in favor of the students. And I mean, I think anytime there's a power shift, I guess like usually they try to take it back. That maybe what's trying to come now to a degree. But like, I think that's another reason this matters is that we have seen like this is like the most massive power shift that we've ever seen in favor of the students, And I think that's just something. that why, this impact, why this movement has seemed to revolutionize just like everything around college sports to a degree is because it's the most notable change we've ever seen in it. And like, yeah.
And it's the times we're living in as well. I mean, you had cases go before, you've had instances go before where there's been maybe a student or a group of students or just a group of people
Yeah.
trying to push for reimbursement for these people who again put their minds and their bodies on the line to perform for this banner, which is the school. But then when you look at social media, you look at constant news, constant information, you have a lot of things flowing to a lot of different people that are able to help in the progress of a movement versus what you had before. So even like you said, it's a power shift or it may create a little struggle, then you're looking at the future of your organization. Like if there's an issue with paying a player or if there's an issue or somebody not getting what they're promised or something change, all you have to do is send out a tweet or make a post. It's on ESPN, it's on Facebook, Instagram, it's on
Right.
X, it's everywhere. And all the kids probably looking to come to that school, walk-ons, you're looking at recruits, you're looking at people who've already signed letters of intent, got the scholarships, they can pull back, within reason or within their time because you see something damaging about the program. So it's really in the program's best to operate in favor of these players because you don't want to damage your brand down the road to prevent that type of talent to come to your school and to choose other organizations.
And I think to your point, like it kind of gets like just want to harp on that for a second because I think that's one of the biggest changes that we've seen, right? I think back in the day, the institution of the school was bigger than the player in that regard. Like even in a recruiting sense, like if you were a football player or even a fan of college football, 10 years ago, the University of Alabama, in a sense, would do no wrong in terms of that would be a dream location for anybody to want to be at any time for any reason. Like, you know what I mean? It
Right.
wasn't matter if Alabama, if you didn't get to play a lick of football and you had to fight against five-star recruits every day, you was at the University of Alabama. Like, or it doesn't matter if, this school, like, I got hurt and they didn't do anything for me or, whatever. Like kids would want to go to Alabama for Alabama, or I wanted to go to Duke for Duke, like, and I think to your point, it's shifted to where no, we have to actually, you know, do stuff to sell ourselves to them. I think schools hadn't had to sell themselves like this before. And so man, that's definitely I think a big change in that, like
Definitely. Yeah, like you said, it's a lot more. You can't even, sit the same people down that, your parents or your grandparents might have grown up watching as far as like coaches or whatever. You're looking at a whole different game where they're trying to get people who are younger, people more familiar with the ways of life now to kind of reach out and grab these young adults and say, hey, come to my program because of X, Y, and Z. But your X, Y, and Z might not be the X, Y, and Z they're looking for in terms of where am I going to spend 1 to 4 years of my life? Or, in the case of basketball, especially a 5-star recruit, you're there for maybe 9, 10 months, if that long, and you're
mm-hmm.
traveling half of that. So what's going to make me stand out from the rest of these programs that all have the same thing is going to be that NIL. And then it's like, how much are we willing to cut to make this specific player come to our organization? Because once you get so high, the only thing is the money, the top notch programs, the blue bloods. I mean, you're just looking at dollars, you're looking at opportunity, you're looking at recent success. It's only a few things that are going to differentiate them once you keep going up to the higher tier of these college programs.
No, definitely, bro. And like it's it's definitely not it's definitely gonna there that's definitely the way that they have to differentiate themselves for sure. And like we know that I guess that this industry is one of the biggest in the world. It's $1 billion industry. It probably trillion, honestly. In terms of just how much money the NCAA and all this generates. And like I do think that these changes, I don't know if these changes will impact them at a bottom line concept, but it's interesting to see if it would. I think if it does, if it starts to, we'll start to see a lot more legal type of ramification or change in terms of that. So I think in terms of since we haven't, besides the employment thing, to a degree, they still making their money, you know.
All right.
But to talk about just some specific examples, it's just some things that kind of changes, I guess, in terms of we seen. You know, one thing that I know I talked to you a lot about that I've always had an issue with is like athletes that are in like the super seniors and like athletes in their sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th years of eligibility and stuff like that, or guys have been, oh, I've been playing, you know, college basketball since 2017, and I done played 6, 7 collegiate seasons now, and like I know part of that was due to COVID. In part, you know, a lot of COVID kids get injured and it compounded, and a lot of that is getting kind of aged out. You know, a lot, I guess that generationally, you know, just phasing out now. But I do think that was something that was very jarring, at least for the time. And I'm hoping it ends, but like at least for the time, I thought that was like I don't I think it takes away from the concept of college sports when you have a 26-year-old quarterback.
Right.
Like, you know, like even if what's the guy that played for Utah now, ain't that the same thing with him? And he's coming back next season. Like at a certain point, like I think you got to draw a line somewhere. Like if you've been playing, if you were hurt for 3 straight years and you just start playing now, do you really think that you're going pro at this point? Do you think they're going to take you, you know, thinking about your injury liability? No, like
Yeah, and it's tough because, like, you look at walk-ons at college, you can look at these 4, 5, 6, 7 round draft picks, especially for the NFL. You know, the MLB has numerous rounds, so
yeah,
you said a lot of these guys have been playing college competition, so a lot of times they will age themselves out if they're still playing. And as far as the NIL, like a lot of that money is going to the guys that are only going to be there 1 to 3 years, especially
right,
depending on the sport you play. But those guys that have that extra eligibility are pretty much doing it for the love. I mean, unless they're a hometown kid or there's somebody that's put up crazy stats, like you're either going to go and make money in your professional sport or you have a degree and that grind is just too excruciating to continue for next to nothing as a college athlete with age. But you got to look at more so how much do they love competing in this arena versus the money, because the money's not going to be there for them as far as the NIL. It's going to be more so in the league. But like you say, that age, especially in the NBA, I mean, they're still trying to talk about getting high school students to be able to enter the draft after they graduate or after they finish their senior season.
yeah,
So a lot of these guys have to prove themselves on that pro level with going overseas or playing in developmental leagues or playing in leagues like in Canada or Mexico, in different places that are not up to what we see in the United States as far as our pro league. So it just takes a lot of time and a lot of grind. But I mean, the ones that can do it, power to them. They can be journeymen, they can be roster fillers, and they can make a modest living because all of these guys, once they make it to the pros, I mean, they get paid pretty well.
oh
So
yeah,
maybe a second, third string that's reliable, just depending on the position. They can do it for 5 or 6 years, make a nice chunk of change and walk away because they've been playing 4 or 5 years in college. So that time that you play in college, when you add that to the pro time, it's going to take a lot more time off of that pro career because you're going to have younger people trying to get in and you're
mm-hmm.
going to have more spots that you're going to need to fill because of turnover, age, retirement, injury, etc.
Yeah. You're always going to be the one at the disadvantage because there's always going to be an influx of younger at your spot. And to your point, even at the pro level, right? Like not all, but most of the time, like the guys that are your journeymen, your bench fillers, like these are still guys that in college were the stars.
Right.
Like like most of the time it's not the bench warmer guy on even on most of your college programs went like he went into work. Like you know what I mean? Like or he went played overseas. Like and I think there are very and more so for basketball than football. But like I think there are multiple arenas where even for those guys that are doing it just for the love can still express or show that. I question if NCAA sponsored arenas are the appropriate place for it.
Yeah.
But I do think there are, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah. At a certain point, you gotta hang it up. I get you. Yeah.
Like I do think like yeah, like if you want to go play overseas or go, even if it's in like Malaysia or something, I feel you. Like just if you want to keep hooping, but like not against 19-year-old kids that are trying to live that dream themselves. Like because your success is really screwing them. Like you know what I'm saying? To a degree. Not yeah. But
Because I mean, it helps, I guess, when you look at the sport. Like, because in basketball, you look at these guys that are 24, 25, 26, you playing against 18, 19-year olds. If you're a big or you're down low, you're supposed to be more physical. You're stronger than them. Your body's
yeah,
developed. You're supposed to dominate them. But if you're looking at something like football, I think the NFL teams are really willing to take a gamble like that because if you're 26 and you come out and say you're a quarterback, yeah, we're gambling on that. We may have to give you your rookie contract and a second one, and we're drafting
mm-hmm.
your parent, or we give you one, and you just fizzle out, and hey, we can go on to another one because there's going to be, especially quarterbacks, every year. But
Yeah,
when you're that freshman, that rookie sensation in college, you're looked at and marveled because of what you can do against older players, maybe a year or two only, but they've got the college experience. They've got that weight room. They've got that A1
right.
schedule and that lifestyle down pat to where they can more so focus on being an athlete versus you coming out of high school. But when you've been doing this 5 or 6 years, you're basically a pro in college. So it's not that awing. And unless you're putting up monster stats, it's not going to get you drafted or not going to get you to stick on a pro American professional team.
I agree with you. I agree with you fully. And like to shift a little bit, like another thing that we've seen, I'll get off the older athletes. I don't want there to be an older athlete listening to us and be like, yo, these guys really just trying to shit on me. Fuck them. Like, you know what I mean? But I mean, but it's real though. Like, how realistic is your chance at this point? But whatever. Okay. Like one thing I want to talk about though is like another kids that continuously transfer schools. Like I don't mind a transfer portal, right? I don't mind it because like kids do we've seen multiple instances. We've heard it, from people we know, from stories, kids going to schools and then getting stuck in positions where they couldn't transfer or they didn't want to risk losing eligibility or I would have did this, but I couldn't get out. I get that. At the same time, people are always going to abuse a rule. And I think we've seen, like the good and the bad side of it, like of what the transfer portal has allowed. And we I think to a degree, it has allowed, even though it has allowed kids freedom to get themselves, to control their own destiny, it has also allowed kids to control their own destiny in the sense that allow them to quit when they want to as well. And I think some of it has been, okay, I'm gonna go to a better opportunity. Some of it is I'm just going to quit on this opportunity. And I think I mean, I don't. That's not an issue particularly on the schools per se. I think it's an issue on the schools because I don't think you should take kids that are continuously bouncing around anyway.
Mhm.
I think that's a problem. But like, I get that they're saying well, that's on the student, but I think that goes back to one of those things where you're giving students a lot of power without the infrastructure or knowledge of how to handle it.
Yeah, I think if I can say I see a flaw in this system, I would say it's with transfer portal rules becoming a lot more lax than they were because you touched on it. You could transfer back in the day, but you lose a year of
Yeah,
eligibility. You have to sit out. And then when you sit out, what do you see? Something that makes you want to transfer again? Do you apply that? And they had to do a lot more maneuvering in order to do a transfer before all of this. And now is, oh, I don't get to play. I'm leaving. Or, oh, I got my spot taken by a freshman. I'm leaving. Or somebody's got more NIL. I'm leaving. What do you look at as far as, well, are they bringing eyes? Are they bringing fans? Or do I just want this talent on my roster, even though they show early a lack of commitment and dedication to the grind? Because, like you said, if you're just going to jump from school to school, it's people who have done that before. It's not new, but it took a lot more. It took your time, took time away from you playing, probably
yeah,
earn a pro resume to get drafted on. But now you can just leave. You can go in the conference. You can just play
just
immediately. You
out.
don't have to lose any time. So that's probably the one big downside I see personally.
Like one example, I won't forget this because like I remember watching it. The What was the kid from the school that Patino coached now? Was it St. John's?
Yeah.
Like the kid like in the tournament, like where he was having a bad game, and I guess him and Patino got into it,
Yeah.
and Patino benched him, and I'm hitting the transfer portal, and I'm just like, yo, y'all were the number one team in the Big East. Like, where else are you going? You know what I mean? Like, I get there's like in the hierarchy, there may be a bigger school, but like you're at St. John's. Like, if y'all win out, you're the number one team in the nation. Like, what? You know what I'm saying? If you play well, like you're as good as anybody else where you're going to go. Like, what are you transferring to? Like, off of one game, you was cool with him before. Like, you
Yeah. And
know,
then with
that
them
stuff
being
might be
so
bubbling
young,
behind the scene, but you feel like, really? Like,
yeah, and with them being so young, like when they transfer, they can tell you anything in the media or have somebody make a post for them on their socials. You really question what they're transferring for, even if they tell you otherwise. Like him, I mean, he can craft any kind of story that he wants, but I mean, everybody saw, everybody watched, they talked about it during the game.
yes,
Why is your best player benched? You got to look at a coach who's been doing this for decades, who might be out of touch with the way these kids feel emotions now, their pride, and people that watch them and talk to them and talk about them versus, well, I just want to compete in a different atmosphere. I want to change. I wanted a fresh start. You got benched in the game. Yeah, your coach should have not done that, but
yeah,
you're leaving because the biggest game, potentially your last game of the season, you're looking at draft stock, your coach benched you. So, I mean, it's a he said, she said, it's a war of words. And you're looking at the kid and they're already getting a shadow cast on them because it looks like they can't stay in the fire when the heat gets hot.
yeah. So I get to your point. It's a different way of how that forecast is on him, and just the
Right.
negative side of that. And like another thing to a degree that kind of just an example that we've seen, and just I think this is wild, is that multiple examples that, and I think the WNBA, well, the I don't know if it's as big now because I think a lot of the desire, not desire, but the hype around college women's basketball, besides the tournament, has kind of died down now that it kind of they get Paige Buckers as well. Like it kind of now that she's gone as well, but like I think that was like the last of like the big stars that people were looking at. But in the days of like when Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese were in college and we're looking at, they were making off NIL like five times as much that they would make, in their first year in the league. Caleb Williams making more than he would make it on his rookie contract. Most kids making more than, Shador making 30 times what he's making on his rookie contract in Cleveland. Like, I think that's it's a crazy concept to consider. It's rational in terms of like the business side of what we're looking at, but it's a crazy concept to consider when you're looking at some of these kids like money I'm making off of outside of just like school, like money Angel Reese making off her modeling deals, whereas more than she was going to make as a WNBA player. And
Yeah.
I think that's wild. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's crazy for a young person. Like it's not like crazy like they shouldn't have that ability. It's just crazy like that's a crazy concept for them to be able to control within their own destiny at such a young age.
Right. And I think that shows another layer that a lot of people don't think about because you'd be foolish to think that these pro leagues and these college, at least the conferences, don't work together. Maybe some of the universities have a tie, but when you give an athlete that type of money early and they're not even professional, you're going to see do they love it enough to make it their profession, to make it their life, be serious about it. Because, like you said, if you're going to make more in college playing on regulations versus you going to a league and getting your first deal to potentially earn another one and see more money than you'll ever see, it's going to show you have the possibility of fizzling out. You don't have the desire to make this your life and commit to this profession. And I think that's a underlying thing that people need to look at because when you see the WNBA, they had, I don't know if it was a rule per se, but it was pretty much a standard. Like you don't enter the WNBA draft unless you're a senior, unless you've completed school. They would maybe talk about the really good players leaving after their junior year, but I mean, to make, what we would consider quote unquote regular job salaries to play professional basketball with the struggles they were having early on in that league versus being in college and making 2, 3 million. And you're looking at athletes like Juju Watkins and Hannah Hidalgo. Like, there are still players in college making a good amount of money more than their WNBA
I
counterpart.
forgot about Juju. You're right.
Yeah, yeah. Like these commercials, I mean, you see them all the time. And even if they're hurt, what do you gain from going to do that professionally? And that's your whole life versus you got a little bit of a social life. You have people that adore you around and you're making money. It's kind of hard to leave. And then once you make that money, is that something that you're willing to keep doing?
Yeah, I think it provides players the ability to be the different position of like, hey, fuck this. I ain't got, like, at any time, like, I think a lot of older athletes sense like, oh, you don't have the desire, but I think it's that the desire doesn't really have to be there in order to succeed anymore. Like it
Right.
used to be, you had to have that to succeed. Now it's not as much in certain positions.
Yeah, because that
Like,
was the gauge of success, that money. But now you can get it before turning pro. I mean, I've done what I wanted to do because a lot of people want to play the sport to get paid. They don't even love it. They're good at it. They can train,
yeah,
and they got
championships
to
don't
make it.
mean as much to everybody as people I think it does. Or
Yeah,
winning in a sense. Like, that doesn't mean as much to everybody as I think people do.
right.
And like, one thing that kind of, I was going to talk about sports betting, and I still do. Like, I think that's a dangerous thing, especially for kids.
Yeah.
And I think this is more generally just every across the board. This is for all student athletes at this point. I think that's like, I think sports betting and sports, I think it's naive to make sports betting accessible to everybody and then tell athletes, but don't bet on sports, at least not the sport you're playing. And then tell young kids, especially with all the money that's flying around and they think they can, especially how just we've seen sport in the general sense coming outside of sports for a second. Sports betting is impacting, like, especially young men at a very hard rate in terms of almost being like a not a scam, but like young men are throwing their finances away at this. And like,
Exactly.
I think with all of those factors involved, that's a dangerous thing. We're seeing, I mean, even my alma mater, A&T got caught up in that with players. This past season, like, and I think it's going to see more of it. How
Hmm.
could you not? How could you not tell a kid at a, Division 1A school, he don't have an NIL deal or anything, like that? Like, hey, you find a way and the way that it's done to a degree is so sly. It's not like, oh, miss all your shots or something like that. But like, hey, you find a way to not play enough minutes so you won't get, 7 assists in this game or something like that, or take yourself out early. Like, it's hard to see a young kid not resisting that. Like, get a few $100, 1,000, $3,000. Like, when you're not one of these stars, like, and I just think that's a very dangerous concept, especially when the punishment always comes down on, oh, you see, they're in cahoots and they're doing, it comes down so hard on them.
Right.
I just think it's setting kids up to fail to a degree.
Yeah. And a lot of things these older adults don't understand. College itself, not just the sports, college is still a grind. So
Yeah.
when you're a walk on, or maybe you're not even a walk on, maybe you're a scholarship athlete year 2 or year 3, and you've had some success. Now it's freshmen and transfers coming in, taking your minutes, taking your NIL. You may not have that money. You may not have that notoriety and that fame because they were cracking down on athletes for free pizzas and tattoos. These people, like the Ohio State scandal a while back, these guys put their bodies on the line. And because they were giving away their championship memorabilia, their jackets and their rings and stuff, they got tattoos. And you're telling me that that was illegal? They're bartering something that they earned. They went out on that field and they earned.
Right.
And you're not going to be able to say all these kids can because, like I said earlier, when these kids can't take these classes, these young adults can't take these classes, they can't go get jobs. They can't do other things like maybe be in commercials or do some signings or public appearances because they don't have that schedule that's free to do these things to keep money in their pocket. So they want to still hang out with their friends or be around and go do things If they don't have the money, they're going to resort to a way to find it. And when you got the players that are making NIL money and they have something other than a stipend or meal credit, they're going to try to find a way to flip that into sports gambling or,
Hmm.
funnel some money elsewhere so it's not followed back to them. I mean, they making it kind of like a laundering thing because you want to make sure you got some money. And if your teammates got money and you don't, you're the odd person out. So, I mean, it takes a lot of fine tuning from these organizations and these players. But like I said, the older adults have to take more of that on their shoulders because these are young people who have probably, in most likelihood, have never seen this amount of money. So when you put that in their hands and they have the power. So you may have the backing, but you got to make sure these are the type of people that can handle that. And if they're not, kind of guide them to make sure that they can be with enough focus and enough help.
Yeah, no, definitely. In question, like I don't know if this is an increase or not, so I ask your opinion on it. Do you think that there's more, or at least a trend of more athletes with serious off the field issues going on lately? Because like I've seen to the degree, I guess we've seen instances of more grievous cases,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know if it's more. You know what I mean? Because guys used to get pretty dirty back in the day. Like I don't.
I honestly think it's plateaued, but with NIL just starting out, it's gonna spike.
Mhm.
Because you saw guys got in trouble for having cars, but now the dealerships that sponsor these universities and they put money in their pockets. Okay, you legally got a car. You get the DUIs, reckless driving. You get in the wrecks. You get in, like you mentioned earlier with Georgia. Like when you give these people money, what do you expect to happen or what do you think is going to happen that you can't prevent or you can't foresee? Because once you're able to go in the world and venture out like a regular adult, you're going to run into those problems. So unfortunately, I think it's going to spike. But right now it's kind of calm because I don't think anybody wants to be that person that puts a dent in the NIL armor because they're going to be like, oh, such and so back in 2025 got his NIL and he got in all this trouble. So you kind of leave that to the professionals now. But I mean, with it being so young, it's not really anything a lot of people want to get caught up in my opinion.
I think, yeah, I think the young man Lacey, was it Karen Lacey at LSU? That's one of the worst examples of it, I think,
Yeah,
where you can see like a young man who is, and I don't want to say it's NIL influenced because again, young men been speeding in cars forever,
right.
but you can see how like the general concept of would he have had the car if it wasn't money that hurt, you know what I mean? Like, and to see just like the concept of probably his mental state after that and seeing like your whole dreams so close to like the culmination of it all coming together being dashed like that because of just like a reckless mistake and like and to see just how that all ended. I think that's one of the things to the point of like where you know it's like nobody wants to be like, oh, you got to look at it in like the worst case scenario, but like that's where some of this shit goes. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and like I think that's just to the point of where the schools have to be aware of that. Like to the point of like, hey, you do have to talk to these young men or and women differently, or at least in terms of some of the stuff that they're going to be facing. Yet, like you know, with the access and the power that you have and the media that you have, I mean, the media presence that you command and everything, like things are different. And I think it's just like with that, I know it's almost unfair to put that on these young people, but like that's the situation that they're in. Like,
Yeah, that comes with it.
yeah. And like one thing that to switch a little bit off of, I guess, a more serious topic. Well, I think this is just as serious. I think it's just more lighthearted. The concept of I call it like the great retirement, but a lot of old school coaches getting out, like a lot getting out. Like they say that they can't deal with these kids, they quit. They say they can't deal with I know one new coach said, I don't know a new coach, but he said like it's no longer about recruiting, it's about retention.
Right.
Like that's the name of the game now. And I don't think, I think to a point, if you were an older coach, yeah, you didn't have to worry about kids leaving because it was hard for them to leave. Once you got a kid in, he was in, you know. And so the revolving door thing, I think, got kids out. NIL, I think to a degree where a lot of kids just did not care as, not want to say care as much, but a lot of kids did not, you have to coach them differently. And I think a lot of coaches like this is my way or the highway type of thing just doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Whether that's right or wrong is kind of irrelevant. It just doesn't work anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I think, just, and I don't even think it's something to like be concerned about. Coaches are going to step in. More new names and legends are going to be made. But it's interesting to see just like the great retirement and kind of like this purging out.
Yeah. I mean, you hit it on the head. It's not a lot of these older guys that are gonna have the energy to. I mean, you already see assistant coaches do a big part of the recruiting because the head coaches are game planning and it makes sure their current roster is good to go, ready for games, in line with the university, good academic standing. So a lot of these assistant coaches that are leaving and ended up getting these new jobs as head coaches, they're the ones that did the recruiting. They're the ones that were on the trails trying to get these students to come. And a lot of these older guys, they don't even meet the recruits until maybe the first visit and the last visit, or maybe one or the other. So when you come and you get this kid with this attitude and this entitlement, y'all begged me to come here. Y'all were at my house, da da da. And then they show up and they're not with the program. That's not the type of player you would want on your team. They're going to leave and then you got to pay these kids. And well, we didn't have to pay these kids. And these kids always did what I said. A lot of these coaches are going to get out here like you see. And I mean, pretty much they're new coaches 1, 2, 3 years now that are at these powerhouse programs because they have to show that they can adapt.
Yeah.
The fact that you're paying coaches and athletes in college, they're not going to have the time to stick around and build a 15-year legacy if they're not winning because you're paying guys to maybe get to the second round of your NCAA tournament. Football is a college playoff now, so you win one game, yeah, you might get a check for the school. But if you're not getting to that title game, we can play a playoff game, we can play a bowl game and do the same thing. So it's going to force a lot of these guys, these new guys out. And a lot of those legacies that the older guys have, they really don't mean much anymore to the people that want to impress their peers and be flashy in front of the audience of the world.
I think that last part that you said, I think is so criminally underrated. And I think a lot, we talk about this often. I think that is so criminally underrated. Then I wish that the kind of the older generation more would understand that just how little that these kids care about your legacy. Like not in the sense of a disrespect of, oh, I don't think you did anything, but that does nothing for them. Like they are worried about what is going to happen for them. They do not care about what you have done.
Right.
And so one thing I wanted to ask is like, well, not ask in terms of just one thing. I don't know if this is like related to like what we've been talking about, but I think it's crazy that it's happening almost in the same time. It's definitely like the conference reorganization. I know that's all monetarily, but like that to me has, if there was one thing that made people look like, okay, this is real live a business and not that it don't even make sense no more, it's that quite honestly, because it just makes no sense. Like
Yes.
everybody's just stopping and shifting.
It's like you look at these conferences realigning, and for example, I I mean it's been a while now. I know they were talking about it, but I don't remember the biggest issue that started the Pac-12 disintegrating like
Yeah.
it did. But you look at that, there is no reason. There's no reason anybody with a brain can comprehend that you have Stanford playing Wake Forest.
And why are they in the ACC? Like, I
You
don't care what money they spent. Somebody should have been like, "That's cool. You're on the West Coast. It makes no sense."
I
Like,
understand if you want to like line them up and do home and homes for a couple of years, but when you are talking about paying these athletes, watching these coaches get fired or retire, you are spending more money putting these kids on planes, jeopardizing their health. The performances lack. I remember I was watching, I think it was Stanford and UNC, and they were talking about the travel, and I'm like, this shouldn't even be a talking point because there's no reason that these kids should have adjusted to 3 time zones behind them. I mean, ahead of them to come over here and play a basketball game, and they have to go back and play a home game in about 2 or 3 days. I mean, a flight alone, you got to adjust your body to, but that just shows you they were scared to make this NIL move because they are kings of bad business. The NCAA has been taking advantage of these kids, and I think it's great that they're getting paid. But it's like we're gonna combat this one way or another. We're gonna put schools that have no business being in a conference like the ACC literally stands for Atlantic Coast Conference. Pac-12 was short for Pacific Coast. Like
Everything
these were
used
the
to be
origins.
regionally based.
Yeah, these were the origins of their names, and you're putting these cross country trying to make these new rivalries, and you got Washington playing in the Big Ten. They're playing against Nebraska. Like, why? Why are you doing like? Why is UCLA playing Wisconsin?
I
Like,
don't get
they don't
why
even.
everybody ran from the Pac-12.
Yeah, like it's foolish. And now the Pac-12 is trying to rebuild with a lot of mid majors or a lot of
Mm-hmm.
teams that are disgruntled in other conferences. But it's like, A, it's not the same, and B, you know how much you're going to have to fight and how much you're going to try to have to win against now what's a power four and pull these recruits from their pipelines to get into your school to make this conference a powerhouse again. It's going to take a lot of time, and y'all did a money grab to try to get more money for your school, but you could have been fine just where you were.
Yeah, like I think my thing is I think in terms of it, I think the Pac-12, it was like I think they created their own prop. Like it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy for them. I feel like they had enough schools that play that are consistently ranked in like football and basketball to where if y'all just would have stayed, you would have stayed a power conference because you would have had enough competition within yourself to keep yourself relevant. You would have your Washingtons, you would have had your USC, your UCLA, you would have had your Colorado in their years, you have your Arizona States, you have your Arizona, like you have Washington State, like you have enough to keep that going. You have Oregon, like you know what I mean? Like you have enough to keep it going. Cal, like but I think, that they just fulfilled their own prophecy with that. I think the Big East, when they made the shift from both, well, I can't say when the shift, when football lost focus for them, I think they went into panic mode long term. Like, I think they went back to, it always was a basketball conference, but for a while, they were respected in football. And I think when that hit for them, and that was much earlier than all of this, but I think when the opportunity to make, all these changes happened, they went right with it. Like Big Ten and Big 12, I think they just were playing mixed match with each other.
Yeah.
With each other, like it's like, oh, should we leave? Should we drop? Like, why? Like, just quite frankly, I never really remembered the difference between the two. So, it is what it is with them.
Yeah.
ACC just got desperate.
If you thought that this was a business opportunity, there's no reason why we couldn't have maybe the Pac-12. You could have the Big 12 merge with the SEC. You could keep the Big Ten for like the Midwest and the Northern region, and then do the ACC and merge them with the Big East. Like, at least make it make sense from a
Yeah.
travel perspective and make it bigger. So if you have four, then you could have a bigger conference tournament and pretty much any sport that you want to, and then send the champions of all these conferences to a playoff. And you can do it that way, and you don't really lose. You probably make more money. But when it's two or three schools floating to go to a new conference, and then, well, we got to keep up. Let's go poach these other schools because their conference is getting smaller, and you just pulling away. It doesn't make sense to just kind of grab who you can grab and just switch at the drop of a hat. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're destroying legacies and matchups, but at the same time, you're doing it to try to recoup this money you're losing from making sure the players are paid, and it's not really going to work out in a good favor for these universities.
And I think, like, that the SEC kind of was the jumping point. I don't think they were the jumping point, but like when they started tacking on adding schools like wildfire, I think to your point, it put pressure on other conferences to try to match it or match what they felt like they could produce, especially football when they were really just like the clear domination of football. And they had their own, when they got the television network and they were being advertised, when they were having their games, at least two SEC games every Saturday on national television. They're usually one prime time. I think that really, but that it is what it is. One thing I wanted to ask, I mean, one thing we ask, like, I think another thing is that, bigger schools now, I mean, bigger schools have always had power. I think, one of the things that we've seen, at least they talk about, is like the death of the mid-major, especially with like the college basketball. And I do think it is harder for smaller programs. It's harder for bigger programs to retain talent, but it's easier for them to recruit talent. I think it's harder. I mean, I know kids are going down and up. Like, you know what I'm saying? Kids are always going to smaller schools to come back up. But I think it hurts I think it doesn't hurt the small schools more. I think it still puts, they're at still more of a disadvantage because it hurts them more when a guy leaves. It's less likely that they will get that immediate guy leaves, guy comes in. Like, you know what I mean? It might be a few years before another guy decides to come to a mid major, or they can build another team. But I also think just like on the flip side of that, when you used to see, I mean, even with schools like Virginia, like, you got on your starting five, you got three seniors, a junior, and a sophomore. And you're not going to see that anymore. Like, you know what I'm saying? Most, like, and so I think, just that is a change. Like, like they have to get used to in terms of like smaller programs or programs that are built around, building long-standing cores are going to struggle or are going to have to shift like their thought, and what to do. I don't know where that leaves them. I think they will. I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know if like with the tournament we'll see like number one seeds every year just because they can bring in mix match whoever they can to put up a good team. But like, it is going to be harder, I think, in the ultimate for these schools to compete.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna present a challenge. The ones with good infrastructures in place with their athletic programs, their ADs and their coaches and the support staff that they have to help these student athletes, I think they should be okay because they have like an expectation. It's not like a brand new school, like say, back a few years ago when Florida Gulf Coast was making noise in the tournament where they're adapting to that fame and that notoriety. A lot of these schools, they're kind of gonna benefit. If I play in Wisconsin and somebody took my spot, I don't want to leave. I'm from there. I'm gonna go to this mid major here in state. I know I'm a player. I'm better than anybody they have, and I'm probably better than anybody they've had in the past 5 years. So, as far like you say, it's gonna be hard to get that talent, but if it's guys that want to play or girls that want to play and they just want to be able to showcase their talents, they're going to get these people because a lot of these people are going to fizzle out or these people are going to come take spots. And then, we talk about the students leaving. What about the students that are forced to leave because they lose their spot and they go somewhere else and they thrive? And that person that took their spot is not really helping the university and they end up leaving. You're not necessarily going to get that player back. We've seen some
Right.
people leave and come back. I mean, it's very few, but a lot of times if you leave again, you're not going to go back to where you left. You're going to go somewhere new. So just as far as them being able to, thrive, it's always going to be tough for a mid major because of the resources. But as far as like just them elevating due to NIL, I mean, I don't think a lot of the good ones are worried about that, but the ones that are kind of hanging on a thread every year, they're shaking. They're definitely scared of the future.
Definitely. And another point of it, just like we see things like, developmental leagues. That's the point we kind of touched on earlier, D leagues, overseas, your semi-pro leagues. Like these are also, I think, for kids that were college from the concept of, like getting the education or degree and all that stuff was not their intention, which is cool. Um, I think those also present other avenues, you know what I mean? And like just I think that's also just another contention that these, I don't know if it's overly large, but it is another contention that these programs had to deal with that they didn't have to deal with in the past, at least.
Right.
Um, but I think that just to talk about the shift a little bit, to talk about just I guess some of the concerns and some of these we've already kind of harped on a little bit, is that the concerns that I guess I have or I've noted from this is just like I think some of these programs do have to ask themselves kind of where they see themselves going or what are they about. I think, we talked about like the concept of like the student athlete and I don't need like it, you have to define what your position is on that to a degree. Like what type of athletic program are you going to be? I think a lot of them now are kind of waffling between the kind of concept of like, oh yeah, we're all about student athletics. We're all about like student performance and making sure these we're graduating kids and all of this, but like you can't if half your team on the basketball team is transferring in and out or they're one and done. Like so like if you're serious about winning and that's what you're going to say, we're going to put out we're going to make sure we get kids in there and they're following the academic rules, but we're going to make sure that we're winning. Then I think that needs to be the emphasis of the program. And so I just think that's part of it is just like it's just not clear from a lot of programs at the moment. Like, what are you really about? Like,
Yeah. And then, me personally, as far as college basketball, I'm a Carolina fan. I think that's a perfect university to kind of put a microscope on because,
yeah,
you know,
the
probably about
basket
20
weaving
years.
classes and
Yeah,
all that stuff.
you putting in these classes that just give them a GPA because half the time they're not going to be there, and it's a lot of stuff you can't grade if they're not participating, but they're competing for a national championship. Hey, let's go ahead and pass them. But even with them, the rivalry with Duke, you said earlier, what kind of program are we going to be? Carolina's not putting a lot of star pros, top 10 picks in the league right now. Duke seems to have a first overall pick in basketball every other year. They just had one this year with Cooper Flag,
Yeah.
and their whole roster, I think they went 4-10, and they have one more guy in the first round, and
They're
then they have,
putting out kids like wildfire right now.
yeah, and Carolina's not winning. Carolina's not putting out anybody, so they're kind of in flux right now. But I mean, for your fan base and that rivalry and the local, rigor, they're just, oh well, Duke's not winning anything either. Duke doesn't have to win anything when you can tell a kid that's coming to your school, we got this laundry list of players that are in the league with max deals, that are superstars, got their own shoes, got 9-figure deals. Like, you don't have to worry about winning, especially when it's a rivalry and they're close. I think it's 6-5 in national championships now in Carolina. Just won one not too long ago, so they just broke the tie. So it's kind of hard to see, programs that don't have that defined spirit. Like, even with Coach K gone, if you go to Duke, you play well, you're highly touted, you're going to the league. So as long as you got your head on your shoulders right, you got to play that
Yeah.
and you can go. But at Carolina, are you a team player? Like, they just lost a guy, Ian Jackson, I think his name was. He was a guy that was highly touted, but Hubert Davis really didn't play him, and they didn't win. So if I'm not getting paid big money, if I'm not winning and I'm not playing, why am I here and I don't get to showcase my talents? I'm gonna go to. He went to St. John's, I believe. I'm gonna go to a St. John's where the coach is gonna let me play and do what I need to do instead of following this old school prestige that doesn't get us anywhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think you touched on something that I think is very important. Winning looks different now. It's not always winning on the court. It's winning at your program. And I think that goes back to the athletic program defining what is it that they're about. And I think you bringing up Duke and Carolina, I think to your point, is very spot on in this, just in a night and day type of operational scheme. Like, Duke is shown like, yeah, we might not be winning national championships in the sense of like, but they went to the national championships. So it's not like they're not successful.
Right.
But at the same time, the program is drawing Obama at the game when Zion is there. They're selling out the arena. They got kids camping 3 days ahead of time for tickets. Like you said, I mean, first, fourth, 10th in the draft this year. Like they almost every team got a kid from Duke on it. Like, yeah. So kids want to go to Duke because in the sense of like what we were talking about earlier, where school can sell themselves, Duke is one that is selling themselves at a level to where they're one of the rare ones to be like, we're Duke. Why you want to come? We're Duke. Kids were like, I'm going to Duke. Why? Because I know what Duke can do. Like, and so I think, that concept of winning looks
They don't do a lot
different.
of work on those recruiting visits, I guarantee you.
No, they don't. And like it looks different for kids. And it looks different for these programs. Just because you win the national championship doesn't mean that you are the most successful. Like Cincinnati is going to have, well, not Cincinnati, sorry, Houston is still going to have trouble pulling in kids over other programs.
Yeah.
Not meaning that they're not going to get kids. They're going to get kids at the University of Houston. But like, you know what I mean? Like they're still going to have problems recruiting kids over Texas.
Yeah.
So just being realistic in that. But like another thing to kind of like a concern in that is that, and we talked about this, just to generally just come back on it is just, I think, are we giving the kids too much too soon? I think we talked about, like, I don't know if we are, but it's definitely has to be some sort of infrastructure to help them with those type of decisions.
Hmm.
And just because of all the things, that they can go. Some of that shit can go really left. They can go into real dark places or get themselves into situations dealing with just that much. That's life changing money. And a lot of people are going to be preying on them because of that.
Right.
I mean, I hate to bring it up, but like with Dion had what's the girl, Brittany Renner, come on campus and talk to them about talk to the team in Colorado. Was it Colorado or Jackson State? I think it was Jackson State he had to talk to about I guess how to handle like these women coming at you and throwing themselves at you. Like I know people are like, oh, you shouldn't do that, but I mean, I do think that's a real topic of concern. Like when you're dealing with these young men and women that with money, and like that's a real like those are real life changing type of issues. And so like just because they're young don't mean that these women won't be going after them. They're rich,
Right.
and so like I think just we do have to prepare these kids to a degree. Um, I do think to the concern I have with NIL is that it does put smaller schools at a disadvantage just because they can't pay what other schools can pay. But at the same time, I do think that was always the case. Like that was always the concept of recruitment. We can't pay what, Oklahoma State uh, can pay you a lot of money, but they probably can't pay you what Oklahoma can pay you.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, so, and uh, whatever small school in Oklahoma, darn sure, Northeast Oklahoma or Southeast Oklahoma, or whatever, apologies if I'm naming the actual school. Like, they're not going to be able to pay, what Oklahoma State can pay. Like, it's like, so that's a concern of mine to a degree when you have all these kids leaving for that reason.
Hmm.
But yeah, like, and I like as a proponent of HBCUs, it sucks for that reason because I do see, but I get it. Like, you have a kid at Virginia State ball out, yeah, he most likely is going to go to Virginia Tech, like, because they're going to pay him to come there, and obviously Virginia State's not going to be like, oh, yeah, we're going to try to, kid plays at A&T and he has a great season and gets nationally, national highlight. Yeah, he's most likely going to be at NC State or Carolina, or Duke, or something next season.
Right.
Like, I mean, and it sucks for the program, but it sucks for the program, and I do think that is a concern. But that's always been a concern. I just think it used to be, oh, I can ride with this school because there wasn't a financial advantage to me leaving, really, in terms of like recruitment. You lose, I mean, not recruitment, but transfer, you lose your year and all that stuff.
Hmm.
But now it's really, I think the greener pastures real thing. I think it makes I think the team building part is hard. And when you talk about sports and team building is like 90% of it.
Yeah, and I think something you touched on earlier. Most, if not all, universities have business schools. So those savvy schools, especially those mid majors and even the D2s and the D3s, you see these guys, they probably could use it kind of like a junior college or a community college. I go play here 1 or 2 years and I'm killing. I'm making all these stats and I'm getting all this attention. Why don't I go to a D1? Why don't I go to a top notch school and finish maybe year 3 or year 4, or maybe just go year 3, see if I can take care of this and do well like I've been doing and I
Yeah.
can get drafted. So you're going to see, oh, well, Johnny Basketball, he went there for a year or two and he transferred up. It's no problem to start low because even if you start low, if you're maybe a 3 or 4 star, a lot of these schools don't even expect to get these guys. They'll go to big schools and sit on the bench, like you said earlier. You go there, you can play. You might leave in a year or two, but there are more eyes on that program because you played there. It's going to help their recruiting. But like I said, the business, the marketing, the coaching, they got to work together and kind of figure out how to get eyes on their programs in the midst of all of this. Because, like you said, the money thing is not an excuse because it's been that way. If I got a huge alumni network, I know somebody with some pocket lining that can get these guys to come visit. Even if they don't come here, I got something in my pocket that's going to make you come visit this university, whereas you won't even think twice to look at a mid major or D2 or D3. So you're going to see a lot of people flourish in the sense of business, in the sense of community, and just in the sense of success. They want to do a lot more to help their university and hope that they can keep their jobs and sadly move on to greener pastures. Because if you can build up one of those small programs to be anything close to the big ones are going to come get you with the same things they do for the students and pull that money out.
Mhm. One concern I have is I don't know what the NCAA, like what they look like going forward in terms of their regulations, in terms of like in my employment, I've had to do NCAA related reviews before. I've had to look at, like their manual and how schools have to comply with that. Athletic, that's what the NCAA makes about. Sorry. But like some of that shit is ridiculous. Just being honest with you. And like hell, we've seen stupidity in terms of like, coaches, recruitment violation, guys, wins getting vacated years after the fact, all this stuff. And I see all of this getting worse, quite frankly, when they start trying to go back and rule check and check boxes on a lot of this stuff. And I wonder what what they as a regulatory body look like, or just how they're going to handle this, because it seems like they're scrambling behind the eight ball to try to figure out some way to curtail this. And I just wonder what that looks like when they finally do it. Like, and just how that impact, that fallout is going to be.
Yeah, it's gonna look like the conference is breaking up.
Yeah.
Mark Emmert stepped down, however you say his last name, because all of this, just like the coaches, it's a different playing field. It's a different generation. So, I
Yeah.
mean, are you gonna sit there and pay somebody to nitpick over all the schools? Are you gonna pay those litigation fees, get those lawyers, and retain those attorneys? Get all of the people that you need to make sure you have fine tooth combs to find out every little detail is being followed how it's supposed to. It's not realistic. It's what you want to do, but I don't think they can. So when you have the conferences getting TV deals, when you're working with something like the FCC and you're in every home and you're on airwaves, you kind of get that money, and it's basically going to turn into an expectation that you have somebody to make sure, oh, we're not putting this guy on TV if they're not regulated by us, or we're not making sure they're doing everything right. But
Yeah.
as far as the NCAA as a whole, I mean, that's in my eyes, that's a big reason they didn't want to go this route, because they knew it would take their power away. So, I mean, just watching them crumble is probably a dream of a lot of retired athletes at this point, but
I think so. I agree.
it's long overdue.
I don't think they're going to gain any sympathy.
No.
Like, I don't think they're going to gain any sympathy from anybody but like the businesses and those in control, like in the control of the situation. But for the people, for the students, and like for former athletes, student athletes, no, they're not gaining any sympathy, because the NCAA as a recruiting body has screwed a lot of people over. I mean, as a regulatory body, I mean, coaches, players, programs. So I can definitely see it, that being the case. And like, I think to a degree, another concern, and we talked about this to a lot of point today, is that just we see some problematic trends arising with students, and I think we talked about that. I think that is a concern in terms of like just excessive transferring and gambling. I think some of the things that come not. I think in the terms of an academic body and not being serious about academics, I think that is something I've always like. What was it, Cardell Jones? Like I came to school like the study football, like we were majoring in football or something like that. Like I get what he's saying, but I do think in the concept of like what you're there for and what they say you're there for, that is wildly different. You know what I mean? Like, and I just think some of this, like I don't, and chasing NIL, all of it. I don't know how they regulate it while giving students still the freedom to make their own choices, to pursue opportunities. But it is a concern in terms of just like we see where some of these trends can get. Some of these students are following to some like dangerous trends, but that is their trend, their decisions to make. I think. And then I think you touched to this point a little bit in terms of like Duke and just with winning looking different. Like college sports seems to, in my opinion, it seems to sacrifice everything for money. Like everything's about making more money, more than any other leagues that I've ever seen. Like more than professional, quite frankly. In the sense of like, it almost seems like programs sacrifice winning for money. Like, and I I don't know where it stops. You know, like I don't know, like if you're a program like you will let kids go, you'll cut, coaching that puts you at a top tier. You cut programs or resources that will put you at a top tier, so you can make, save some dollars or do something like that, or you are willing to leave a conference that would put you in a good standing every year because you want to make more money by going to a different conference. Like I swear to goodness, Oklahoma is going to be like, in the SEC. Like that's a prime example. Like you go to a conference where you got to fight every week, fight for your life every week, but you didn't want to stay where you could be. I get the big fish in a small pond, but you're still a big fish. Like
Right.
I think people forget the big fish part. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but no, you would rather go to the big ocean. So now you got to fight with the bigger fish and then get mad when you don't get any shine. Well, how could you? Like, you're fighting against bigger fish. Like,
Yeah.
that's the concept of big fish versus bigger fish. Like,
Yeah. And a lot of these, I mean, the programs are, like you said, when they're sacrificing everything for money, it's dog eat dog. Because even if you look at it with the, we said earlier, the pros work with the college programs and the governing bodies, because you see, when the college football playoffs are on, you don't see many other sports playing, or if they play early in the day. You don't see other teams really playing on Thursday through Sunday on March Madness, and because they're playing all day the first
yeah,
two rounds. And then when you get to the Final Four, you don't see any games. They kind of ease back up in those round of 32, Sweet 16. But once you get to that Final Four, I mean, they kind of freeze out. But I mean, you're looking at it, trying to make money. And that's what a lot of these coaches and a lot of these governing heads really do. They're out here to get the money. So they're putting greed over everything else. Like you even saw it with this past year, the NFL putting games on Christmas. And it was always NFL's Thanksgiving, NBA is Christmas, and they're
yeah.
encroaching
The
on each other.
overload on Christmas is insane. Like,
Yeah, like
that's,
they're trying to, dominate that market. And you're looking at the program now, it's going to be NFL versus college. Even though they play on different days, who's to say the NCAA on their last strike to try to show people that they reign supreme, they don't put the National College Football Championship on a Sunday during the playoffs? Who's to say they don't do that?
on a Sunday night. Yeah.
Right. Who's to say that they don't have some kind of draft event? Even though it's for the NFL, all these players are coming from college programs. Why not have a draft event? They can overstep that boundary very easily to try to dip into some of that money that they feel like they're losing paying these college athletes. So, like you said, the winning looks different. Winning is, oh, I'm churning out these athletes, or oh, these people are getting paid and they're going pro. But it's not, oh, I went to 5 championships in a row and I won 3 of them. So we're going to be a successful program here. You just have to get with the program. So it
Yeah.
just depends on who's in charge. And I think once those seats start revolving and different people get in, it may look a little bit cleaner, but there is going to be, like I said, there's probably going to be a few last hurrahs to try to get that power back. And it's going to either work and piss somebody else off, or it's going to look really bad and they're just going to drown in the process with everybody watching.
I agree with you, bro. I think like the concept of where how some of these programs it's the concept of, I mean, where some are like, hey, we're fine, we're fine being in a position where we're losing or whatever, as long as we get our TV deals, as long as we get these kids coming in, like as long as we get, if we can get this recruit, he come in for a year for basketball team, right? We can get this recruit, he can come in for a year. He can get us some eyes on our program. We'll turn them out. We've made our money. We're happy. Like, and I think, like, yeah, to your point, it's like, okay, if you're winning, if you're like, oh, we won just 3 straight national championships, you still might not be the most popular team in the country.
Right.
And that's just it's wild, but to your point, that's where we at now. And like, so to kind of like conclude or to wrap and bring a wrap to it, I think like, we talk about how like the NCAA and like the conferences, the universities, just like all these different kind of like the bodies of the regulatory bodies of it all. Like they always profit of control. Like I mean, they're never going to lose the profit or the control of the players to a certain degree. But and so with that being said, like, well, let me rephrase what I'm saying. they're always going to be the controller of the situation. So I do think that this stuff was needed. NIL, like transfer portal. I do think these were needed to give student power. Um, I do think at the same time that like we were saying, programs have to identify, like what are we about? Because if and then I think the NCAA does as well, because about just what is college athletics about at this point. Because I think if we stick to this notion of it's all about the student athlete, no, they need to be in class and their practice time need to be regulated and they shouldn't be getting money for X, Y, and Z. And if we're going to stick with this kind of dystopian lie that we've been telling since the 80s about college sports, then what like it's just like a slap in the face. It's like we're saying one thing, but we're boldly outly doing another.
Right.
And so like I just think, like if we're going to keep making them, I just think stop making a mockery of this concept and you like should have get off the pot. Like, what are we doing about this? Like, um, and like I don't know if the current environment is the best setup for the student athletes at the moment, but it's better than what it's been. I think it's a lot of bad that comes with it, but that's usually what comes with change. Like, like but like there's room for improvement. So, hopefully we'll see that in the future. And
So
like,
trial and error, like it's like like we touched on. It's not a lot of experience because it was under the table activity, but when you got people that's been in it maybe 5, 6 years and they turn it over or they want to do something different because they got more experience and they have other programs reaching out to them, it's going to be people that come along and tweak things and kind of make it better. But I mean, like you said, it's better than it has been. So just letting them try it out, trial and error, crash and burn. I
yeah,
hate to say that, but I mean, that's what you have to do essentially to make sure that this is going to work for all involved.
I agree. And last thing I'll ask is just where do you see college athletics going? Like 10 years, 15, just in the future, where do you see it going?
I mean, it's either it's going to be super popular or it's going to be super watered down because we don't know, especially with young people. I mean, that time of your life where you transition from so much structure and regulation to freedom. And, even with, us and other people that just went to college, you got that kind of freedom that you probably never had. So you add some money into that, you got to see what type of person you are. And anybody that's went to a university, no matter how close or how far, when you have that kind of freedom that you never had and you're young, it's going to show you what type of person you're going to be. You're going to develop into that.
Yeah,
So, I mean, if you're going to be, a program or you're going to be a conference that has a lot of student athletes that just excel at sports, that's going to hurt your alumni base and maybe your alumni doesn't support, or you're just going to be somebody that's focused on getting student athletes to be student athletes. Then you got the alumni donors with the pockets that I'm not paying for this. I'm not paying for people to have these bachelors and these masters and these doctorates
but we're
just
not
because
winning nothing. Yeah.
yeah, like it means something to different people, but the type of meaning and the people that it means that to are going to be big things. So you can either see, I personally think that the NCAA football is going to rival NFL because it's so many more teams to pick from and a lot more fan bases. Whereas you look at college basketball, I don't think it's close to having the superstardom because these kids don't stay.
Yeah, turnover is too high.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
too high. I can be at school A, then I'm at school B, and I'm at school C, but I'm not in college. I'm not at that level of basketball for more than 4 years. And if I'm any good, if I'm any kind of potential to be a superstar, I'm there for 1 year.
Yeah, the sample size is very
Always,
small.
yeah, it's always a gap. And then that's another transition to more freedom and more time to focus on your craft going from amateur to pro. So I think it just depends on the governing bodies, what they decide to do with things and how they let these people progress. But it's the onus is on the programs majorly because you got to mold what you want your school to be and what you want your part in that conference to be as to promote growth and future improvements to your program.
You brought something up that I have to to bring up before it just came to my mind when you were talking about it before we end. Like, I think one wild thing that we'll see now is that in 50 years, like the kids that are going to have their jerseys retired by universities, it's either going to be kids that are not going to be the most popular players in the NBA or the NFL because, well, in the NBA, let me stick, college football is always going to be there because they have to be there 3 years.
Mhm.
So they're going to make their impact at that program. They might transfer, but they're going to make their impact at a well, maybe with transfer, maybe not. Um, maybe with the transfer portal is different for college football as well. So yeah, let me bring that back out. We're going to see like a lot of schools like where the players that they're hanging in the Raptors are either going to be kids that were there without a large sample size to really say that they're the best there, or it's going to be kids that were there that made their name at their school and weren't like and aren't like the stars of the league. Like, Duke is not going to be it's going to be interesting to see, is Duke going to hang Kyrie Irving's jersey from their Raptors? Are they going to hang Zion Williams jersey from their Raptors? They're going to hang Cooper Flag jersey from their Raptors for 1 year to look at? I mean, maybe so. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, but it is an interesting concept to determine, because the kid that'll be there all 4 years that might probably break the school scoring record probably ain't gonna make the league in the way that we're looking at it now. You know what I mean? Like, be a 4 year senior,
Yeah, who
yeah, probably
determines
ain't
that
making the league.
prestige going forward? That's a big question. Like you said, you got a lot of famous guys coming in and out of Duke, but they're there for 1 year. When you're looking at guys like Nolan Smith and other guys that have played in Duke 3 or 4 years, and it's like, yeah, they didn't blow big in the league, but they are still impactful and they're still loved by Duke and their fan base and their community. So it just depends who's in those seats 10 years from now and however many years you choose to look for.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it, man. We've been chopping it up for a minute, so I
Sure.
want to say just to everybody, again, thank you for tuning in to the Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It podcast. I'm your host, Robert Davis. One more time, just to plug myself, follow me, Instagram, RTD underscore III, Facebook, Robert Trey Davis III. Again, the podcast is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. So yeah, appreciate y'all. Rick, give you the last moment, before we sign off.
Hey, man, I think this was a very important topic. I mean, it's going to be talked about ad nauseum going forward because of how people are, how older people are, how younger people feel. But hey, man, I'm honored to be a part of it and had a great dialogue today, man.
And bro, I appreciate it. Anytime, man. Anytime. Have you on. We got to have you on the show again, bro.
Yes, sir. Definitely.
Well, look, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Catch y'all on the next episode. All right, out.